So you can think of enzymes as catalysts in the human body in that sense. So let's look at the things that the body regulates or controls. First thing is blood glucose concentration, water levels, and temperature. Very important because a high temperature, either due to a fever or an infection, can be very harmful to the proper function of body organs and body systems in general. All right, so I think we'll take each of them bit by bit. We know that blood glucose is controlled by somehow the body has a mechanism in place. That's where insulin comes in, and then that's for blood glucose. We know also that excess glucose is converted to glycogen for possibly future for storage, and equally for possible backwards conversion into glucose for the body if the body's glucose concentration is too low. Okay, so those are the three basic things that the human body controls. There may be more, but I guess for this level, these are the three that are being considered. The first, the other things that we need to consider are receptors. They detect a stimulus as a change in the environment. So stimulus usually comes in from external sources. External sources, that's where stimulus coming from. So where do these stimulus get, where are they coordinated or where are they received, so that the body can make sense of them? That would be the brain. Okay, the spinal cord, of course, is equally an extension of the brain. And then the pancreas. Now, it's important to remember that receptors. Did you say something?
No.
Okay. So receptors in this sense are basically largely made up of your nerves, okay, the nervous system. And then, of course, effectors are the ones that would respond in, like as a response, as a means of either protecting the body from harm, depending on what the stimulus is, or basically bring about a response. So let's look at the nervous system. So we can see our nerves are very important and very, very essential for us to thrive. The first thing that we need to understand is that the speed of stimulus getting to, to the coordination center, which is the brain, is very important, so that, in cases where the stimulus coming from the environment connotes harm, the body can quickly respond. So you can see that there's this equally alludes to the fact that some form of electricity flows in the body, some form. And so that's why you can see these responses are transmitted via electrical impulses. And those who are doing researches on the brain would equally attest to that fact. The brain and the spinal cord make up the central nervous system and receive the stimuli. And the nervous system is made up of sensory, motor, and relay neurons. Those are the ones that receive the stimuli and carry the signals to the impulses to the brain. All right. So this is basically the structure of a motor neuron. The parts are uh, uh, adapted to its function. It's a cell, right? So what the things that we expect to see in a cell should be there. Of course, it's a specialized cell. So this is not the general cell that like stem cells that are general, don't have a particular um, function. These ones are specialized for what they do. So you should expect that there will be parts of, this motor neuron that you would not see in a regular cell. The nucleus is there, cytoplasm is there, the liquid inside, and the cell membrane, that's the external covering. Now, the parts that we shouldn't expect to see in other non-specialized cells are the dendron and the nerve ending. Okay, so that one is suited to a motor neuron. Now, a sensory neuron, let me see if I can expand that picture. Yeah, okay, sorry. I think I've not made this guy to be editable. Let me enable editing. Okay, all right. So, okay. So this is how let me make this larger. Okay. Can you see the picture that I expanded?
Yes, yes.
Okay. All right. So you can see it looks different from the one that we just looked at now, the motor neuron. Okay. So motor neurons receive impulses from relay and sensory neurons. And of course, they will transfer it to the coordination center. Okay. All right. But of course, you can see that they have some things in common. Both of them have an axon. That's like the path through which the impulses travel. Okay. All right. So let's move on to the next bit. Okay. So I think this is this is a diagram that summarizes what happens in a typical setup where you have the motor neurons, the sensory neurons, and um, the effectors. Okay, so you can see the relay neuron connects the sensory neuron to the motor neuron. The motor neurons send impulses from the central nervous system to the effector that will respond, while the sensory neurons are the ones that send impulses from the receptors to to the central nervous system. Okay, so the spinal cord sends the message to the coordination center, which is the brain, makes sense of it, and the brain now sends it back via the motor neuron. What should be the right response in that case? Okay, so let me move this so that you can see the a reflex is a rapid automatic response that cannot be controlled. They usually help keep you safe. So it looks to, at some times, I think what they call them involuntary, those are the ones that make up the categories of what you call the involuntary actions, right? The body responds by itself. I mean, it's like you don't even think before you carry out those actions. So those are the things that um, form reflexes. Um, in that sense. Okay. So I think we saw a reference to a synapse in this case, where two nerve cells meet. Okay. So let's see. So this is a diagram that represents where what a synapse is. The axon of the sensory neuron is there, and that's the cell body of a relay neuron. So let's take a look at the diagram again. A sensory neuron and a relay neuron. Okay, so you can see the sensory neuron up there. The relay neuron just comes directly underneath it. And that's the vital connection. You know, to us, it may look like they're not connected, but they are connected. Okay, so these are some things to note. Impulses pass along and reach the end of the sensory neuron. They release a chemical known as a neurotransmitter, which diffuses across the synapse. Okay, looks like that's the area where they meet, and then binds to the receptors on the relay neuron. Okay, and then finally, that's the way that the impulse is transmitted on the next neuron. Okay, so that's from the sensory neuron to the relay neuron. And you can see the diagram there that shows the neurotransmitters which release the chemical. Okay, what do we have here? Okay, this is a practical. Some things to note might be there. So I think I would, you may just want to note this for what you have as the control variable, the dependent variable, and the independent variable. But I want to believe those most of those details will be provided in the paper. But yeah, sometimes they usually ask for the control variables. So in this case, now I'm just thinking, why do you think the volume of drink, the height the ruler was dropped from, and the height the ruler was dropped from would be control variables?
Oh, because it needs to be the same for all of them.
I didn't hear you. What did you say?
It needs to be the same for all of them.
Yes, yes, yes. So it needs to be the same for all of them. And then the other ones, the independent and the dependent variables, those ones are, I mean, those ones are what you would, I think those are the things that will determine how, if you are going to plot a graph, you know, what would count, okay, if you are going to plot a graph. So let's see. So I think that's the details of that experiment will be given in the paper. Okay. All right. So remember we're considering the body's inner coordination mechanisms. That's under homeostasis. So the nervous system is one way the body helps to coordinate internally. And the next one we're looking at now is the hormones. the endocrine system, which secretes hormones that are needed for different processes in the body. So the first thing to note is that hormones are chemical messengers that travel through the bloodstreams, the bloodstream. I'm sure the ones that usually we remember estrogen. For I think that's estrogen, and for men, the one that really stands out is the testosterone. Those ones, that's um for the males. Okay, so what else do we need to note? They are released by glands and they last long within the bloodstream. Okay, so this is just a basic table comparing the nervous and endocrine systems. In the nervous systems, impulses are stimuli will get, interpreted and then transferred through the body as electrical impulses, while the endocrine systems depend on the chemical messengers to flow through the blood while they are moving. And nervous systems, of course, because they're electrical impulses, they'll definitely act really fast. And compared to the endocrine, which depends on blood flow, which can equally be not stagnant per se, but slowed down as a result of either blockage or stuff like that. So they are slow acting. They don't act as fast as the nervous system. And then effects, of course, response in terms of reaction, the body's reaction to a harmful stimuli. They are very quick, while these ones um, are not that quick, but they definitely last for longer. The effect of estrogen, for instance, um, we know from research and all that it can stay for long because it's in the bloodstream. So let's look in detail on the endocrine system. I think it's good to just know on the surface um, um, what gland produces what um, hormone. So the first one, let's see, how many do we have here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. All right, so let's look at the first one. The pituitary gland, the one in the brain, right? That one is known as the master gland, and that one releases the hormones which act on other glands. So this one is really a determinant of other glands. Um, uh, its function, or part of its function, because as part of regulating other glands, it regulates the menstrual cycle and produces um, two hormones. Okay, so let me see. I think I'll need that. Um, the full. Just give me a minute. The that master gland, the pituitary gland. Uh, I just want to be sure of. Okay. All right. So the full meaning of FSH is follicle stimulating hormone. Okay. So that's the meaning of FSH. Um, okay. And then just give me a minute. Let me get the meaning of LH. FSH and LH. Okay. All right. So, well, the important thing to note is that both of them are um, for basically regulating, like we see, they regulate the menstrual cycle, which that's for women. And of course, if it's for men, they also have something to play with in the regulation of um, uh, sexual development, okay, for men too. But then one other thing is there's something else to note here that steroid production also uh, comes to play in what these the hormones released by that gland, um, what they do. The the other one that comes directly, well, the next one that comes under is the thyroid gland. And if there is I'm sure you know that a if there's an issue with the thyroid gland uh, and of course regulation, um, it could lead to goiter. Um, that's there's a scientific name for goiter. I'm going to get that, but I'm sure you probably noticed people that have that goiter and enlarged thyroid. So that's basically what um, creates it. Um, okay, but yeah, I just thought to throw that in. So the thyroid gland produces the thyroid um, hormones uh, that control metabolism, body metabolism. Um, okay, and just for the records, goiter is caused by lack of iodine in the diet. Okay, lack of iodine in the diet. So a deficiency in iodine would cause that swelling of an abnormal swelling of the thyroid gland, which will show up as a swelling on the neck area, like the around where the throat is. Okay, so the next thing that we see here is the adrenal gland that's just above the kidney. That's in men, okay, just above the kidney. And of course, I believe too for women too. It's basically for fight or flight response. Okay, so that's the popular, I'm sure most people know about this one, adrenaline, that would make one to do certain things that they are not even, normally prepared for, just to escape or to fight back in defense where one feels threatened um, um, by a situation in the environment. Okay, so the pancreas would produce insulin and glucagon. Okay. Now we know that insulin helps to regulate the glucose concentration in the uh, in the blood, right? And that is good for the body, so that there's no excess, um, which would results in some body conditions that are not favorable for the body, um, and as in high blood sugar. Then the other glands that are there, well, the ovaries, which produce estrogen and progesterone, and then male reproductive hormones in males, which is that's the testosterone, which stimulates sperm production in males. And of course, you can also see that the females have their that's an equivalent of that in uh, estrogen and progesterone. Okay, so that's these are basically like a summary of the glands in the human body that help to do internal coordination on in the endocrine system. Okay, so this is just a closer look at let's see. Okay, insulin, how insulin works. That's the pancreas, which produces insulin. So when if the body has normal blood glucose level, nothing happens. But if it rises, you can see what would happen. The receptors in the pancreas would respond and produce insulin, which binds to the receptors in the liver, and respiration rate increases, and all this would eventually result in a fall in glucose level, so that it goes back to normal. So if you think about it, this is what actually happens. What we know is that insulin helps to control the glucose concentration of glucose in the human uh, in the blood, yes. And so this is just like a detail of how that happens. Receptors in the liver, and then rate of respiration would increase. That would um, now lead to a fall in glucose levels. Now, if we remember that respiration involves breathing in, right, oxygen, and um, um, okay, so when we if we consider, I know that there's something about the reaction of respiration and photosynthesis. They're kind of like a reverse. They're kind of like a reverse. Photosynthesis would would lead to um, production of glucose and water, while the reverse uh, be would be like a breakdown of glucose to go back to carbon dioxide and um, yes, carbon dioxide and water. Okay, so I'm not too sure now, but I know that they are usually like opposite reactions. When I see the listener, I would be able to, but just know that respiration would would cause a consumption of or a use up of glucose in the blood, which would now somehow bring the level of glucose back to normal because the excess has been used up. Okay, so this is a close-up. Now, please confirm to me if looking at this is if this particular topic is under the higher version or is still under foundation, because this slide was just titled foundation. So I assume that all the topics are in foundation.
Well, I thought it was titled higher.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay, okay, all right, good. Okay. So these are the different types of type 1 and type 2 for diabetes, and it's non-communicable. Of course, type 1 is the one most people know, uh, where the pancreas does not produce enough insulin, and of course, which should normally help in the um, reduction of glucose levels. And these are the different treatments. Now, to say potentially treated with pancreas transplants and stem cells would suggest that these this is a possibility, right? And I'm sure research is pushing hard in this direction. If they've not gotten a headway yet, but then in the meantime, insulin injections is the way most people know for this treatment to be administered. Type 2 is the case where the body is resistant to insulin. Okay, so it's not the case of it not producing enough. And what could have caused it? Genetic or lifestyle risk factors. Uh, okay, so that's highly um, um, is up for consideration. Lifestyle risk factors, and then the treatments would include exercise and a healthier diet. So most people are usually, should I say, more informed of type 1 than type 2. But well, I guess with time, more people get to know about type 2. Okay, so how do the hormones work in menstrual cycle? This is for females. Um, okay, so FSH, that's the follicle stimulating hormones, is produced by the pituitary gland and stimulates egg to mature. Um, um, that before they are now released by the ovaries, because it's a mature egg that's released. And then estrogen is produced in the ovaries uh, and is involved in building the uterus lining in preparation for the egg to, be housed there and stay when it has been fertilized by the sperm. Then that one, the LH, fine. The name is kind of I don't know if it's a French name or something, but or German. But anyway, if you check this thing, the name, it looks kind of hard to pronounce, but what it does basically is also produced by the pituitary gland, and it stimulates ovulation, which is the release of the egg, and the progesterone produced by the ovaries maintains the uterus lining. Um, so you can see that the estrogen and progesterone work together to ensure that um, the fertilized egg would stay, okay, while that's um, it's waiting to be fertilized. All right, so this is just like a breakdown. Um, so yeah, I think this is a detailed thing of how it works. But let's see. I don't think, did I miss anything out? Uh, okay. No, I don't think I missed anything out. Progesterone, I mentioned that egg remains unfertilized. It stimulates ovulation and fish production, stimulates production of this, causes the egg to mature and acts on ovaries to produce estrogen. Okay, stimulates production of FSH. Okay. Okay, so I think this cycle, you can say that this cycle starts here, where menstruation happens, starts 5 to 7 days. Yes, which stimulates the production of FSH, and FSH causes the egg to mature and acts on the ovaries to produce estrogen, and which stimulates production of the uh, L hormones. And this hormone now stimulates ovulation and the production of progesterone. Now, if the egg gets fertilized by the sperm cell, then um, it would not, then the egg, you can see that that's an exception. So there are two parts that can happen. Either it will come down to this part and continue, or if nothing happens, it remains unfertilized and, gets flushed out. So yeah, that's a summary of what happens during menstruation. Okay, so this is a bit of info on contraceptions and what they do. Okay, so of course, basically, we understand that contraception is would not encourage fertilization of the egg, or the process of reproduction at any point, at different points. So whether it is inhibiting the follicle stimulating hormones, or prohibiting um, progesterone um, to um, to prevent ovulation, or just at any point in the cycle where reproduction should give rise to um, you know, a fertilized egg, anything that can prevent it. Contraception, different forms of contraception would um, would come to play. Okay, so these are the um, different ways that contraception would work. Um, of course, we all know that, or this is widely known that, what do you call it? Sorry, let me undo that. That ovulation calculators help to, uh, I think that those ones are more of abstinence. They so these ones are, should I say, risk-free, because people who engage in using calendars or calculators would not need any of these, um, which could cause issues later. And of course, this this one looks more like a permanent thing, right? It looks more like a permanent thing, sterilization. So that's basically stuff that contraception will do. Okay. So let's see. So that's the way. I think this is the second unit. Let me see the units again. Where are we now? So let me know where to go back to. 18. Okay. So let me just look at the units again. The first one was homeostasis and response. And the second one now is inheritance, variation, and ovulation. Okay, so I'll go back to slide 18. Oh, yeah, so I can move on to 19 now. Okay, okay, so um, in considering inheritance, uh, we need to also talk about reproduction somewhat. The first thing to know is that there are broadly two types of reproduction, sexual and asexual, or opposite of sexual. Sexual involve gametes, a sperm, and an egg, or in plants, a pollen and an egg. Okay, so in asexual, no gametes are involved. The next thing we see is that meiosis is the only thing that asexual reproduction does. In other words, one cell, since no gametes are involved, so no two gametes come together for asexual, but in terms of for reproduction to be for asexual reproduction to be reproduction, something must multiply, right? And that's going to involve cell division. So that's meiosis. Then mitosis would be as a result of, well, the two cells coming together to um, become one, and then um, of course, there would be division, but that would be more of specialization kind of division, cell division. Then genetically identical offspring. Yes, since all of them came from one cell, they will definitely be identical. There's no, what do you call it? No space for variety or spicing up, if you like. But then in the case of sexual, because they come from two different individuals or two different organisms, then you should expect genetically varied offspring to inherit from both um, um, yeah, organisms that got involved in the sexual reproduction. Okay, so let's look at mitosis. What happens during mitosis? Then, of course, the next slide would consider um, meiosis. Uh, okay, so you could take note of these facts. DNA replicates to form two copies of each chromosome. The nuclear membrane breaks down, because so that um, you know the cells, the what the things that need to happen during mitosis can take place. Because I think at a point where we'll be looking at trees, what happens at the possible genes that can happen when you have different types of character traits, either, tallness or shortness, stuff like that. When they combine the possibilities, or when you have AS and SS and stuff like that, those kind of things that happen when you do the mapping and all that. This is what allows it to happen. If the nuclear membrane doesn't break down, then there's no way there can be a possible mix. Chromosomes line up down the middle of the cell, And then after that, they are pulled apart to each end of the cell. Cytoplasm and cell membrane divide to produce diploid cells. Okay, so there's a form of division, but of course, it's not like it happens after a coming together. That's for mitosis. Um, for meiosis, you can see it's quite straightforward. Chromosomes make identical copies of themselves. Similar chromosomes pair up. Sections of the DNA get swapped. Cells divide twice to produce haploid cells. Cells produced in meiosis have half the number of chromosomes. Okay, and um, the full number is then restored at fertilization. Cells differentiate as the embryo starts to develop. Okay, the embryo starts to develop. So I think this also um, um, happens. This happens in the well, if you like, in humans and animals. Okay, cell differentiation happens in um, humans and animals where after mitosis has occurred. Okay, so some things to note. Haploid cells, what happened? What are the outcome of meiosis? While diploid cells are the outcome of mitosis. Okay, um, I'm not too sure they would really harp on this, but well, it's still okay to take note of what they are. The definitions for DNA, a double helix, that's the structure, the shape of the DNA. It looks like a H formation with those um, um, things in between, the chains in between. The chromosome, the structures the DNA is contained in. The gene is a small section of the chromosome that codes for a protein. That's what tells which um, um, which character traits are, you know, dominant or that, will be involved. The allele, two different versions of the same gene. Okay. So for instance, if capital T would represent tallness, TT would represent tallness, then the allele in the case of tallness would be TT for tall, and then a small letter T for TT for not so tall. Okay. Then genome, um, the entire genetic information of an organism, the genotype, genes or alleles that code for a characteristic. That's blood, BB, okay, and then um, phenotype, the physical characteristic that appears. Example, brown eyes or blue eyes. Those would be for phenotype. Um, of course, I think the popular genotype that we all know, you know, um, AS, SS, AA, and stuff like that. Um, okay, so what are the things that the genome which is the entire genetic of information of an organism, would help us to know. Genes linked to diseases, understand the threat of, understand and treat, inherited disorders, and trace migration patterns from the past. Okay, so these are the things that understanding the genetic information of an organism will help us to know. Of course, this is not it's not a new thing. There's a lot of research in this area even today, and it's a good thing because it's been on for a long time, generations. Okay, so there are some other um, definitions to take note of. Of course, what I'll just say about these guys is this. Anytime you see the what do you call it? Um, um, Prefix, yes, that's the word. If you see the prefix homo, right? Homo always stands for the same when things are the same. Okay, so just as a means of being able to remember it. And hetero stands for when things are different. Okay, so that's where you see homogeneous, heterogeneous, and stuff like that. In chemistry, you have homologous. You have homologous series in chemistry, and that means they have something in common. They have something in common. So the same homo, different hetero. Okay. I think human beings are also another name for the human species is Homo sapiens. So there's so many things that we have in common. That's why the what do you call it? The prefix Homo is applied to humans too. Okay, so dominant genes, it says only need one copy of the allele for it to be expressed. That's why they are dominant, okay? They're dominant. They only need one copy to be expressed because they would show up. They are dominant in it. While recessive, the ones that are the opposite of dominant, they need both copies of the allele for them to be expressed. Okay. All right. So multiple genes interact to determine a characteristic, and the probabilities of Punnett squares, that's those things that we use to do the mapping, are not always exact. Some characteristics are controlled by a single gene. For instance, poor color in mice, right? Red or green color blindness in humans. Yes. So some of them are controlled by a single gene, not usually double. Okay, so these are some facts. Humans have 23 pairs of chromosomes, and that's 46 altogether. Okay, that's, yeah, that would come to play. The X and Y determine the gender. Of course, we know this. XX is for female and XY is for male. So some other facts to take note of, things that disorders that can be inherited, extra fingers or toes, and cell membrane disorder. Okay, but it's good that those guys are recessive. Recessive, the cystic fibrosis is recessive. Okay, so what does it say here? Embryos can be screened for, for inherited disorders. The ones without the disorder are implanted into the uterus. Okay, so let's take note that this is what usually happens in a scenario where most likely you have assisted reproductive therapy. Okay. So what do I mean? Things like IVF, okay, where you know, couples are assisted to, to help have children. Then you'll be able to select and screen the embryos for inherited disorders. Of course, it's possible that maybe a couple that didn't even want to do, they decide, okay, let them just check. But this usually happens in a case where you have several embryos and then you're looking for the ones that do not have any disorder that will be implanted into the uterus to guarantee what's a, a life free of disorders for the child. Okay, so that's by the way. Okay, so what's variation all about? Differences between individual members of a species or population. And this can be in three dimensions. Either it's purely genetic or purely environmental, or it could be a combination of both. Okay, and that's variation. Um, okay, just a minute. Okay, so I'm just looking at this. So let's spend some time here before we move on. Um, uh, could you give some examples of uh, variation that you know? I don't know. Are you there?
Yes.
Some examples of variation.
Um,
Okay.
let's,
So 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 remember, variation has to do with differences, right? So what are those things? Some of them, some of them are things that you're familiar with. They're not that difficult. Things that usually you find different in humans. Okay, maybe I should start. Let me just give an example. For examples of variations, genetic variations, okay? Eye color, you could find people who have blue eyes, some have brown eyes, and sometimes it's not even a function of probably they are from Africa or they are from Europe or stuff like that. Sometimes it just happens, right? Eye color is one. Um, blood type, those are variations in the genes. Okay, so remember these things I'm giving you are genetic. Okay, so they are genetic in nature. Eye color, um, um, of course, we know that there's a place where melanin is what gives that dark coloring in the eye, and of course Africans too and Black people generally also have a level of melanin that's also um, influences the color of the hair. So that's why you see albinos don't have their hair usually doesn't have that dark color that we have. And of course, you can see that also playing out in the color of the pupils of their eye. melanin is lacking or deficient in that case. Okay, but of course, different levels of melanin production could lead to variation in eye color. Now, the other types of variation that we know, blood type, okay, blood type, which blood group, what we call blood grouping, which could be blood group, people who belong to the blood group O, or A, or B. Those are the three broad blood groups. Okay. Then another one which I'm sure you would know, skin color, right? I indirectly mentioned that when I talked about albinos, their skin color, variations in melanin production influenced by genes lead to different skin tones. Those are things that you need to um, um, remember for genetic variations. And then, of course, height. Well, height, someone could argue for that, but height is also influenced by diet and all that. But, uh, we can't rule out that it's also a variation that can be affected by genes. So what I just gave you now was um, genetic. Okay. So environmental variations could be things that are caused by environmental factors. Examples are, of course, those ones are like external influences. These are not inherited, but are caused by the environment the organism lives in. Well, some could be related to height. That's one of the things I said, or weight due to diet. So you see, this is not coming from whether the parents were tall or fat or stuff like that. No, this is because it's related to diet. And another one you could think of, development of scars from accidents. That is caused by an environmental factor. Okay. For plants, because we also need to consider the fact that this is not only talking about human beings. For plants, I'm sure you've seen that experiment several times. Plants that grow taller in shade to reach sunlight, okay? Plants naturally look for where sunlight is. So if a plant is kept in a place where it's dark, right? And you leave that plant for some days, come back and look at that plant later. You kept it somewhere, maybe in your room, and your room is dark. This is just like a controlled experiment. Your room is dark, and you are growing this plant in a pot, and then you kept it in a room where there's a window that sunlight somehow is not so much, but at least you have the curtains, across it. You come back and look at that plant, and you will see that the plant will be tilting towards where the sunlight is coming from, in the direction that the sunlight is coming from. Why? Because that plant needs the sunlight to be able to produce its food. So if it must grow, it will grow in the direction and possibly bend in a way that will help it to get sunlight, the sunlight that it needs for what do you call it, for it to grow. Okay, so I just felt I should just give an example, since this slide doesn't really give much of examples for variation. But anyways, okay, so let's proceed to evolution. All right. So mutations cause variation, but most of the time they have no effect. Cell mutations usually happen at the cell level, right? At the cell level. That's why they can cause variation. Okay. Rarely they determine the phenotype, that's physical characteristic, and this can lead to evolution. It's a change in inherited characteristics through the process of natural selection. All right. So remember that evolution is a, how will I call it? It's a world of study based on research, but then this more likely, um, some of them may have met with some form of opposition in terms of the validity of those research and the hypothesis that um, um, that supports the research on evolution. So we need to um, just take it as it is. Okay, if there's any fact that is being given there, there is, there's a there's most likely possible evidence that can disprove it. Okay, so let's just take it on face value. Okay, so this is one of the facts that evolution believes, that all life evolved from simple life forms that first developed over 3 billion years ago. Now, remember that one of the possible facts that people may want to give for the likelihood that evolution happened, right, is that if human cells can, we saw it back there, mitosis, and then at a point, specialized cell division, where cells now specialize, even a fertilized egg, will now would will subdivide into smaller cells to prepare, them for the different parts of the body that the baby will have when the baby forms. Then, you know, complex life forms can form from simple life forms, if that's the possibility, if that's a fact that happens within a human body, that's what some of them argue. But that still doesn't, again, rule out the fact that evidence have come up to contend with some of the facts that we're seeing here in evolution. So that's why, again, I say, as a precaution, take it just as face value. Okay. So there's this is possibly a what do you call it? Um acronym. I don't know. I don't know if you consider this an acronym that will help you to remember this. Okay, so if it's under foundation, then, well, I guess you need to remember it. VC bar, right? Um, so variation leads to competition, and all these are things that evolution believes, okay? A hypothesis of evolution. Variation leads to competition. Competition leads to better adapted. Okay, so variation leads to competition. Now, the ones that are better adapted will survive and reproduce and pass on their genes. So this is also possibly supported by the fact that scientists have discovered all those fossils that show that there were life forms that no longer exist, that have become extinct, largely the dinosaurs, the tyrannosaurs, and those um, um, species of animals that don't exist again. And so this is what is the result. This is what supports this concept of evolution of a species, that variation would lead to competition. So there will be some form of competition among the different variations in that species. Then the ones that are better adapted, that would better adapt to their environment, either by their lifestyle or what some form of what do you call it, body features that they have, like we'll see later, because adaptation is another topic on its own that talks about how an animal, or yes, an organism would be able to survive in its environment, either by it being able to escape from prey, or it being able to survive in a place like the desert, like cactus. What are the adaptations that cactus have to be enable them to survive in a place where there's no water and stuff like that? So the better adapted ones will survive. And of course, because they survive, they will be able to reproduce and pass on their genes to the next generation. Okay, so you can see some examples. There is variation between the giraffe population. Some have long necks and some have short necks. Okay, so Noah, are you there?
Yes.
Okay, so this acronym, do you feel it's something that will come helpful?
Yes. I'm writing it down. I'm not.
Okay. All right. So let's just as to buttress the point for um the for this acronym, we are considering the giraffe population. Of course, there are other populations that you can also consider. Um, some have long necks and some have short necks. Giraffes compete for food higher up the trees, of course, by virtue of their necks. And of course, the giraffes with longer necks are better adapted, and these ones would reach the food. And so they survive and reproduce. The ones that have shorter necks would, naturally die out, except if there is human intervention of some sort. Okay. The genes for long necks are now passed on to their offspring, the ones that survive. And this happens over many generations and can lead to formation of new species over time. So remember, VC BAB, okay, that's what the acronym stands for. Okay, so these are some other um, aspects of survival of the fittest. In this case, we're considering bacteria that can become resistant to antibiotics through mutations. Okay. And I think there was a question like this we saw, but I think it was in biology paper 1 or it was paper 2. I can't remember which one we're looking at, but one of them I talked about this where it said if you administer medication to a child, and why is it not advisable to administer medication at a point where the the um, the concentration of the infection is at a low point. Excuse me. And so it was somehow creating a case for the fact that the body, the bacteria can become resistant rather to the antibiotics. And then when the body now really needs help, the antibiotics may fail. Okay. So sometimes it's good to just allow the body fight the infection. And then when it looks like, okay, it's not, the white blood cells are not doing they're not really helping, then you can now introduce the antibiotics to prevent um, resistance from the bacteria. Okay, so how do you solve the problem? And this is it. Stopping the prescription of antibiotics, finish the course of the antibiotics, that's to ensure that all the bacteria are killed. Stop prescribing antibiotics for viruses. They are largely for bacteria. Disinfectants or hand sanitizers in surgeries help to kill resistant bacteria. And the next thing is to isolate infected patients. This will reduce the spread and reduce the chance of the bacteria becoming resistant. Okay. Okay, so I guess it was paper 2 that we were looking at back then. Okay, so of course, evolution fronters, people who believe and front for it, have what they call evidence. I've given you one earlier, fossils, what they see, dinosaurs and all that. Fossils, they say, show the development of organisms. Of course, fossils also say something. They say that these organisms once existed, but somehow they've either died out or something happened to them, okay, that made all their population go out of existence. Funny enough, if you weigh the idea of organisms going out of existence or going into extinction, you would wonder how they could have gone into extinction. Could they have died because there was not enough food to eat? Because some of those dinosaurs are great active hunters, and they never fail when it comes to going for their prey, you know. Then so it makes one to think if this evolution thing is really it, or there might be something else that possibly happened that wiped all of them out, somewhere in history. Well, that's still up for debate. Okay, so what other evidence do they see for evolution? Antibiotic resistance in bacteria because of mutation. They can mutate and develop a form of resistance. And of course, the fact that science now understands how inheritance works. Okay. All right. So, do you have any questions so far?
No, I have no questions. Sorry.
Okay. 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 So so this we already know. I'm sure you have an idea of what fossils are. Remains of organisms from millions of years ago, organisms that have not decayed and completely, of course. Parts of organisms replaced by minerals as they decay, preserved traces of organisms, example, footprints and stuff like that. Okay. Extinction is what happens when there are no individual members of a species left. Okay. So extinction can be a risk, okay, for some species that look like there are fewer in existence. Of course, I'm sure you possibly see that from time to time on the internet. Maybe one zebra that looks different from the way other zebras look, stuff like that. Llamas, I'm not sure of llamas if they are really that common, but yeah, those ones too are, at a risk of extinction. Some of them are at a risk of extinction. Okay, so these are the things that could cause extinction: disease, competition among species. It could be as a result of the fact that being hunted by humans. I think this is one of the things that cause extinction the most: hunting by humans. Okay, and that's why the government tries to create government restricted areas, or forests and stuff like that, where those ones that are likely to be extinct after a while can be um, kept safely. Then lack of food could also cause that, so they die out. And of course, loss of habitat. So sometimes when humans cut down trees, and these animals are, they keep pushing them forward, further into the forest, and they don't have anywhere to go. That could also cause them to become extinct after a while. Okay. So could you confirm if this topic, this next one that we're looking at now, is under foundation or higher?
Oh,
Hello, Noah.
yes.
Yes.
I believe it's
Okay. Okay. All right. So this is under foundation then. Okay. Selective breeding, artificial selection. Humans breed plants and animals for their desired characteristics. Of course, we are always looking at how to push the boundaries to ensure that um, um, we get the best in terms of selective breeds. Okay. Uh, so how is selective breeding done? This is the process. Just take note of it. Select parents with the desired traits, breed them together, select the offspring with desired characteristics, breed them together, and then repeat this over many generations, only selecting the ones with the desired characteristics. Now, I'm sure you would have noticed this, that um, food, we see this a lot. There are certain species of bananas that look bigger than others, right? That's for fruits, and certain types of apples that equally look bigger than others. So sometimes, in fact, in most cases, these have been intentionally bred selectively by those who are um, ensuring that they can control pollination, cross-pollination between the species of the one that has the desired characteristics and the one that has another desired characteristics, to ensure that we have desirable fruit. And sometimes the aim may be, okay, we don't want the tree to grow too tall before it starts producing fruit. Those are different. There are different things that could be desired characteristics. It could also be that, yes, like I said, the fruit needs to look bigger than it would have typically looked. Characteristics chosen include disease resistance, animals which produce more meat or milk. That's like, Friesland cows. Those ones are deliberately, selectively bred to ensure that, you have higher profit for the farmer. Domestic dogs with a gentle nature, um, like um, bulldogs. Well, yeah, bulldogs. Sometimes bulldogs may not be so friendly, but they are strong. So to achieve different species of dogs, sometimes people crossbreed or selectively breed dogs. And then large or unusual flowers. Okay. Um, okay, so these are some concepts. I think they are on the they are further, they go further to um um than just genetic or selective breeding. Genetic engineering and genetically modified crops, are they covered in foundation?
Classification is higher.
Okay, classification is higher. How about genetically modified crops? Eleanor, are do these ones go for foundation?
No, this is also higher.
Okay, so from genetic engineering then, from genetic engineering all the way to this, right?
Yes.
Classification. Okay. How about this one? Naming.
Um, yeah, I think this is foundation. I think that's foundation.
This is foundation.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so I think for this one, all you need to do to know the order, if I'm not sure if they care about that, but yeah, the order is to take note of the acronym, keep ponds clean or frogs get sick. That should help you to keep this in mind. The kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. Order. Okay. So the genus name usually comes first, and then the species name usually comes last. So I think for humans is I think it's that Homo sapiens I said. Um, so that should be it for this. It's simply a system of naming organisms. Okay. Now, for communities, are we supposed to consider this too?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So community is simply made up of all the species of plants and animals in a specific habitat. A stable community is one in which the populations are relatively constant. Okay, so the changes are not that drastic. That's a stable community. You can think about some of the big forests that like the Amazon forest. Those are stable communities. Their populations stay relatively constant. Interdependence is something that happens between different species in a community when they rely on each other, either for food, for shelter, for pollination, etc. I mean, just that word interdependence can be explained in so many directions. Think of butterflies or insects, how useful they are to plants when they come to suck nectar. Okay, so you can see the butterfly is coming for nectar, and as it descends on the flower, it somehow picks some of the pollens from the flower and then goes to another flower. And while it is trying to suck nectar from that one too, it drops some of the pollens into that other flower that it's trying to get nectar from. So somehow, as it's gaining from those flowers, it's also helping those flowers to do what? Reproduce. Okay, so what are the things that animals could compete for? Food, mates, territory, and what are the things that plants could compete for? Light, space, water, and minerals from the soil. Okay, so those are the things that plants usually compete for. And you can think of that competition among plants too in when you consider weeds. So the reason why weeds are not good on one's farm, and anywhere actually, is because number one, they are not desired, they are not wanted. So the farmer didn't plant them. Number two, um, they compete with the plants that you want for what? Minerals and water. Okay, they compete. So let's have that at the back of our mind um, when you're considering uh, communities and plants. Now, um, biotic and abiotic factors. Do these come under foundation?
Yes.
Okay. So biotic are living factors, abiotic are non-living factors. Okay. So, so you can see the non-living factors. They affect um, um, organisms, irrespective of which organism it is. Soil, moisture, oxygen levels, okay, rainfall, right? And all that. Okay. So those are the things that affect organisms. Okay, so I think I've indirectly talked about this. Adaptations. A feature of an organism that helps it to survive. That's the simple definition. For instance, you could have structural adaptation. A polar bear has fur to keep it warm. Okay, so what other adaptations can you think of that were not mentioned here? Shape of the beak on a bird.
Um,
Okay, shape of beak on a bird.
or should I say one?
Yes, no, I mean, what other What other adaptations do you think are structural adaptations that you could come up with?
Um, big ears. I'm sorry, the
Okay, for rabbits, right?
yeah.
Okay. Okay. How about plants? Do plants have structural adaptations?
Um, I guess leaves. The They have big surface area to collect more sunlight.
Leaves. Okay. Okay. Um, okay. Can you think of a plant that has big leaves that would allow it to maximize sunlight capture and therefore food production?
That's
Okay. Have you heard of the water lily before?
oh yes, yes, yes.
Uh-huh. So you see the way the water lily grows. It just forms its leaf, and because it's what they call it, it's water resistant, right? It doesn't, the leaf, no matter what frogs can even hop on it and all that, but water cannot penetrate it to make it sink. It will stay on top, so that the air, the oxygen can come in and all that. So it's what they call it, hydrophobic or something. I don't know. It doesn't let water pass through it. Okay, okay. So let's look at some other types of adaptations. Behavioral, uh, examples of behavioral: bird calls and migration patterns. Yes, we know that when birds at the time of the year, they will always move from one um, location to another. Sometimes people say they do it unconsciously. They don't even know they are doing it. And guess what? They always go to the right place. They don't have a GPS, but somehow they always go to the right place at the different times in the year. Okay, hibernation during winter. Okay, that's another thing. Um, let's see, functional or what? Physiological. So penguins slow their heart rate underwater. Why do they do it? Okay, so let's take note of this. See, they slow down their heart rate just as a way to conserve oxygen, and I believe to also conserve energy. Then camels, they have kidneys that are structured to limit urine what? Production. Okay, so of course we most of us we know the other one, structural. That one is more like a structural thing. Um, what they have on their backs, that help them to be ready for um, life in the desert. Okay, so take a look at this. All right, so what do you think about this? We're moving on to something else now.
Um,
Ecosystems.
Yeah, yeah. No, I knew this. I knew that.
Okay, okay. So this is under general under foundation, right?
Yeah, yeah. But I knew this.
Okay. Okay, good. Okay. All right. So the first in our own ecosystem and in others too should show um should have grass. Okay, so let's look at this. It shows what they do. So grass is a producer, and then hmm, okay, grass is a producer, and rabbit is a primary consumer, right? And fox, which would later feed on rabbit, is a secondary consumer. Okay, so now that we have this at the back of our um, mind, I think we can move this. They provide energy. Okay. Does this graph make any sense to you?
Yes, I understand. I understand it.
Okay, all right. So, okay. So this is okay. I think this is supposed to mean a sampling quadrant or quadrat. Quadrat is a frame. Um, so this is talking about things that we use basically in an ecosystem to measure things and to carry out experiments. You can look at them in details later. So this is recycling, recycling. Okay, please take a look at this um, carbon cycle and tell me what you think about it.
Yeah, I knew the carbon cycle.
Okay, just evaluate it from your own perspective. You can start with at any point in the cycle, whether you want to start with photosynthesis or the animal in the middle.
No, when they add questions like about something
Yes.
like the cycle, they'll usually
Okay.
make you fill in. They'll give you like photosynthesis. No,
Okay. Okay. Those ones that have fill in the gap, right?
yes, yes, yes.
Okay.
Be like
Okay.
that.
Okay. That's nice. Okay, that's
Yeah.
nice. But that's still fair. At least for you to be able to fill it in correctly, right? You would still need to understand what's happening. At least from the basic thing that we know, right? Animals would respire and give off carbon dioxide, and that goes into the atmosphere and is used for um, photosynthesis. Okay, carbon dioxide combined with water to give you photosynthesis. Then, what do you call it? Dead organisms. Uh, uh, okay, they produce and waste products will go into the soil and they will form fossils and fuels. And of course, these are used by factories. And when those factories use up those fossils and fuels and refine petroleum and diesel and all that, they give off what? CO2. Okay, so this is just more like a summary of what happens in the carbon cycle. This other one looks like the water cycle, evaporation, uh, transpiration, loss of water into the atmosphere. Okay, so yeah, so the water cycle is just directly there beside the um, yeah, the carbon cycle. Okay, okay, how about biodiversity? Is it a foundation topic?
No, no, no,
It's not.
no. I don't. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, okay. Waste management.
Yes.
Are you sure about waste management?
Let me check.
Okay. Okay, let's just look at it because it's the last set of slides though. Let's just look at it since it's not much. If it's not, then we didn't lose much and then we would end it with global warming. Okay. So waste management is all about um, um, avoiding managing waste in the best way to avoid pollution or avoid it being harmful to humans. Rapid growth of human population and increase in living standards. These are the things that cause waste. Okay, more resources and more waste will be produced, and this would lead to what? Pollution. When you have people moving into a particular area, they will buy cars, they will use cars, okay, and all that. They will eat, and when they eat, depending on how they dispose their waste, in the long run, waste to be produced. So what are the things that how waste can manifest? Either sewage, fertilizers, toxic chemicals, etc., etc. Remember, fertilizers are an aim of man to improve agricultural yield, isn't it? But sometimes fertilizers don't go too well with the soil and they become toxic to the soil when they're in excess, especially, or flowing water washes them away. Toxic chemicals, we know that can come from industries. Now, the air is another place where pollution can happen, air pollution, okay? So let's not forget that smoke and acidic gases. We talked about, yes, I remember that one of those questions that talked about acid rain. Okay, H2O plus CO2. When you combine H2O plus CO2, you have H2CO3. That's, I think, carbonic acid or something. And that can cause skin cancer and, you know, um, yes, as a result of acid rain, that's when the rain now falls and then dissolves the CO2 that's in the atmosphere. What else can happen? Land from landfill and toxic chemicals. Okay, so this is possible. Some companies dig up large expanse of land, create large holes, and they pour all their waste inside and cover it back, hoping that this landfill it will not be harmful to humans as long as it is underground and all that. Um, Waste chemicals need to be correctly handled to reduce the risk of more pollution. Waste and chemicals need to be correctly handled to reduce risk of more pollution. Pollution kills both plants and animals and reduces biodiversity. We didn't look at biodiversity, but of course, we are simply saying, you can think of biodiversity in terms of variation among species. So if a particular group of a particular species experience extinction as a result of pollution, then the chances of one of the humans from that species or one of the organisms from that species um, um, uh, joining with another organism from a different group of that species, a chance of that reproduction happening between those two organisms will be eliminated because this other group has become totally wiped out by pollution. So that's how I understand the reduction of biodiversity. But if you have another idea about that, you can share. But that's how I understand it. Um, Land use. These are the things that you could use land for. Building, quarrying, that's mining, farming, and waste dumping. These are the things that land can be used for. And this reduces land for both plants and animals. This is what I was talking about back then, that can cause animals to go extinct after a while. And of course, plants too can go extinct. It's not just animals that go extinct. Um, 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 so um, um, the main culprit when it comes to air pollution is CO2. That, as we'll see in the next slide, contributes to climate change. And as difficult as compost is difficult as compost needs to be cheap for food production, but need to conserve feed bulks for biodiversity. Okay, so I'm going to leave this because it's still somewhat around biodiversity. Now, the big guns, deforestation, which is as a result of human activity, using up wood for things like furniture and, so many things that wood has found itself to be used for, building, etc., etc., road, and yes, building houses and stuff like that. So this releases carbon stores from trees, okay, deforestation, and which means less CO2 will be removed from the atmosphere. Remember, CO2 is used for photosynthesis. So the argument is this: if you cut down the trees that would use CO2 for photosynthesis, then less CO2 will be removed from the atmosphere. And this CO2 that is hanging in the atmosphere is what's responsible for your acid rain, and it's what is responsible for global warming, which we'll see very soon. Um, it's um, um, it provides land for cattle and rice fields, and it grows crops for biofuels. It leads to loss of habitat, that's deforestation, because the animals that live in trees, birds that live in trees would not be able to stay there anymore. And it increases soil erosion and causes uh, little life barrier, flooding and landslides. And air pollution happens when trees are cut down. I think that's what they meant to say there. Okay, so was there any reference to global warming in that paper two that we did back then? Was there any reference to global warming? Hello, Noah, are you there?
Yes, hello.
Yes, I said, do you remember if there was any reference to global warming in that paper two that we looked at back then? Do you
Um,
remember?
I think that on the well in the paper they added a question about global warming, but
Okay, okay. But you can see from this one slide, can this one slide, can you understand the meaning of global warming in this one slide? Just look at it carefully. I think this picture really summarizes it. Even though, of course, there are people that who don't agree that this is actually happening, but I mean, it has a lot of reasoning behind it. The ozone layer is around the Earth, right? It's around the atmosphere of the Earth, and um, somehow we have uh, parts of the ozone layer being eaten up, caused by human, um, 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 pollution, right? Pollution, which is CO2, what they call greenhouse gases being released. CO2 is one of them. Then, excuse me, there are these compounds that they call chlorofluorocarbons, CFCs, as they are being released into the atmosphere as a result of human activity. Those also eat into the ozone layer. Now, the ozone layer is supposed to be a protective layer around the Earth's atmosphere. But if it's being eaten up by these CFCs and CO2s, happening, then what will happen is that there will be holes in the ozone layer. And those holes will allow UV rays from the sun to go into the and hit the earth, okay, which some people have attributed to skin cancer, excessive heat and all that. And then also heating up of, the icebergs at the Arctic and the Antarctica, those places where you have icebergs at the North Pole and the South Pole. So when those things are heated up, then you can expect sea levels to rise because those icebergs will melt. Um, Dry climates, areas will become uninhabitable. Okay, and then loss of habitat because those places will be too hot for organisms or for animals that stay there to be able to survive. But of course, there is no doubt that evidence, is there for global warming that happens because climate change is also it's also an effect of global warming. Climate change, which is seen by unusual, either when rain falls, it falls too hard or falls too long and causes floods and stuff like that. Things have actually changed, over time. So these things have been attributed to global warming. So efforts are made by different governments to either cut down the use of um, um, cars or machines that use fossil fuels, because those are the ones that are usually giving off carbon monoxide and other CFCs into the atmosphere. That's now the new wave for EV cars and ships. Now, even ships, there are some electric battery powered ships and heavy machinery that use batteries and whatnot. Even yes, ships that are powered by ethanol as opposed to diesel, which is a fossil fuel, or petrol, which you have for cars, um, which are fossil fuels. But yes, so that's just the summary of global warming in this picture. I think this picture summarizes it. So if you would like me to send this to you, I would convert it to PDF and send it to you via WhatsApp. Would that be okay?
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So um, I think it would be okay if we looked at a question paper in our next class. So I'll stop sharing for now. Yeah. So our class tomorrow is for 6, right?
Yes, it is.
Okay. All right. Okay, then enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, you too.